Hello, welcome everyone. I'm Andrea Gonzalez with Trellis Strategies. Thank you for joining us today. Maybe some of you are having lunch with us in your workday. We really appreciate it. We are in our Trellis Strategies 360 discussion series, and in this series, we are discussing institutional transformation to empower modern learners. Today's discussion is our first in this series, and we will specifically be discussing learners and how institutions need to rethink or perhaps consider more intently their evolving characteristics. Our discussion will be led by our president and CEO, Dr. Debra Chromy. Okay, it's leveled off. So I will hand it over to you, Debra. Let's get started.
Great. Thank you, Andrea, for putting this all together. Really appreciate it. And thank you all for joining us for this next hour. I got to tell you, past experience says this moves incredibly fast. You're going to be blown away by how quickly an hour goes by. So thank you for joining us. As Andrea mentioned, I'm your host, Dr. Debra Chromy. I'm president and CEO of Trellis Company. And we have a great panel lined up for today's discussion. As Andrea mentioned, the theme of this whole discussion series is institutional transformation to empower modern learners. And today's topic is really focused on institutional transformation to better serve today's modern learners. And as I mentioned, we have three fabulous individuals with us today for our panel. The first is Valerie Dent. She is the Associate Vice Chancellor and Chief Deputy for Student Success for SUNY System Administration. In her role, she is responsible for providing senior leadership and guidance to the newly formed and wide-ranging student success portfolio, which includes enrollment management, university life, and opportunity programs, prison education, transfer initiatives, the Center for Professional Development, and the creation and expansion of evidence-based workforce and degree completion programs. If that isn't enough, Valerie in September also was appointed as Interim Vice Chancellor for Community Colleges, where she oversees the SUNY System Office responsible for supporting all 30 SUNY community colleges. So, Valerie, thank you for carving an hour out to be with us today. Really appreciate it. Next up, we have Dr. Darryl Ann Lai Fang. She is the Assistant Vice President of Transformation Support and Institute for Capacity Building at UNCF. With a robust career that spans over a decade in the higher education sector, Dr. Fang has established herself as a visionary leader known for her transformative impact on strategic planning, program management, and institutional development. At the heart of her success is an unwavering dedication to fostering educational excellence through innovative strategies and a comprehensive understanding of the complexities within the higher education institution. Darryl, we're very excited to have you with us today. Again, thank you so much for joining us. And our repeat panelist, so happy to have Ray Martinez back. Ray serves as President and Chief Executive Officer of the Texas Association of Community Colleges. Here we call that TAC. So apologies ahead of time if Ray or I use the word TAC, that's what it stands for, the Texas Association of Community Colleges. It's a comprehensive membership association comprised of a diverse mix of 48 community colleges. That's right, 48 here in the state of Texas, all across Texas. Before joining TAC, Ray served as Deputy Commissioner for Academic Affairs and Workforce Education for the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board. He was also president of the Independent Colleges and Universities of Texas and Chancellor of Western Governors University, Texas, and has held senior government affairs positions at Rice University and Texas A&M International University. Ray has also served as director of the Committee on Higher Education in the Texas Senate. With that wide-reaching background, I can't wait to hear what Ray has to say about all of this. And again, appreciate Ray being here. For those of you in Texas, you know we're in the middle of legislative session, so really happy that Ray was able to carve some time out and be with us today. So thank you all three of you for being here. Really appreciate it. I'm going to kick off with a little bit about the modern learner. As I think many of you know, at Trellis Strategies, we base our work around helping entities understand, and adapt to the modern learner. And our recent financial insecurity and time poverty among modern learners brief, which you can see on our Trellis Strategies website. I'm just going to share a quote with you. Nearly 3/4 of modern learners report working while enrolled. 3/4, 75%, are working while enrolled. And among those who worked, 63% reported working 40 hours or more per week. 63%. Balancing school, work, and family can be very challenging and can sometimes mean placing school at a lower priority. A majority of students aged 25 and older, 62%, think of themselves as workers who go to school, not students who work. So that's really, I think, a different look. And we think about modern learners. That's different than certainly when I was in college. Conversely, only 24% of younger students, those under 25, consider themselves to be workers first. When the student persona is at a lower priority, it may be more difficult to focus on academics and persist to graduation. So with that as some background, I did want to start off with a couple questions for our panel, starting with what are the defining characteristics of modern learners, and how have learners evolved? And I'm going to start with you first, Valerie.
Sure. Thank you so much, Deborah, and thank you so much for having me. I think that, we look at modern learners as those students who are not necessarily just the traditional high school graduate. This is something that has been, I think, evolving, as everyone knows, over the last few decades. The demographic cliff, as everyone sort of refers to it as, has really impacted higher education tremendously. And it's only those who I think are taking a serious approach at expanding their portfolio to address who those new students might be. And new students could be anyone sort of who is not sort of that traditional high school graduate. So, in New York, for example, we are taking a very, very intense look at adult learners. And by adult learners, we're talking about those people aged 25 through 55. This is a population that has always been with us, either coming to college, in spurts, or who have in fact completed a college degree. But because of the understanding that, and in New York, the expectation is that we are going to see a decline of high school age graduates by nearly 27% by the next number of years. That is going to be the indicator of success of our colleges. Who are we going to be recruiting? Who are we going to be retaining? In addition, we're talking about learners who are really focused on that ROI, that return on investment. It's not just sort of the assumption these days that I go to a four-year college and, earn a degree. There may be thousands of people out there who are interested in a credential or who are interested in an associate's degree, who can really use that to catapult themselves into the workforce. Those people who might be upscaling, those people who might be changing their careers. There's lots of opportunity to expand our reach to students beyond that traditional high school age student. And then, of course, there's all the supports that are needed for all these populations. Those have also changed. The pandemic, I think, raised that awareness very clearly, that students at any age are in need of mental health supports, are in need of, in many cases, basic needs support. There are housing insecurities, there's food insecurities. We need to address all of those because that impacts the way in which a student learns at whatever age. And so I would sort of venture that's sort of a lot of the characteristics that we're seeing in the modern learner.
Great. Thank you so much, Valerie. I'm going to turn to Ray now. I think Ray would echo much of what you said, but I know here in Texas, we're doing some other things, Ray, that I think are trying to get at the differences in these modern learners, especially at community colleges.
Totally agree. I think Valerie's comments are so on point, and I agree that I would amplify everything that Valerie just said. And before I jump in, Deborah, let me also say thank you as well to the Trellis Strategies, and I'm so glad to be asked to come back for a further discussion, and will always be available. I'm a fan of everything you all do, so thank you.
Thank you.
I think, yeah, here in Texas, just sort of building off, Valerie's comments, community college students here in Texas, and I think this is true for public two-year colleges across the country, our students are more diverse than ever. We serve recent high school graduates, obviously adult learners, career changers, veterans, parents, of course, students who are juggling family and work responsibilities. Many of our students enroll with prior work experience. They require our institutions to be flexible learning formats and to be innovative in finding ways, for example, to award credit for prior learning or competency-based education as well. All of that is so important for today's modern learners, and we know that from experience. According to our SHIO, our coordinating board here in Texas, 21% of students enrolled at Texas community colleges are adult learners. In fact, here at our 50 community college districts across the state of Texas, meaning that they are 25 years of age or older. And in fact, the average age of a Texas community college student is 22 years old. These modern learners, our community college students in particular, prioritize affordability. They prioritize career relevance. They are looking in many instances to upskill and reskill. Some have the traditional notion of enrolling or matriculating into our colleges with the idea that they'll complete an associate's degree or at least their core competencies and then move on to transfer to a four-year institution. That's on average, about 75% of students who enroll in Texas community colleges are looking to have the traditional academic experience and then transfer to a four-year. But a growing number, 25% and really growing, are learners who are looking to acquire a relevant workforce education skill set and look for employment immediately upon completing that particular credential. And we have to be mindful about that. The other thing I would say also with regard to this particular question is that I think I was going to say in Texas, but I know in other states there are similar efforts where our new funding model, which transformed our state revenue funding 2 years ago for all 50 community college districts from one that was based upon contact hours or enrollment to one that today is based upon outcomes and performance. The incentives for community colleges to do even more with modern learners, particularly with adult learners, of which by most estimates, Illumina and other sources say about 4 million Texans fall between the age of 25 and 64 who have some college credits but no credential to go along with those credits. HB8, it's what we call our funding model here in Texas, really incentivizes colleges to do even more, to become more innovative, to be more flexible when it comes to, again, the modern learner that we're talking about. Not that it's exclusive just to adult learners, but we have, as I think Valerie stated very clearly, we have the need to make sure that we adapt our business model from a community college perspective, at least, to accommodate those adult learners who in most instances are juggling both family and work responsibilities. And we take that very seriously. We're going to continue to accommodate and continue to innovate.
Great. Thank you, Ray. And thanks for mentioning House Bill 8. I know you were incredibly involved in that and getting that moving forward. So thank you for that. I want to turn to Darryl now. We've looked at New York and Texas. And so, Darryl, you have a much wider lens. What would you like to add to this sort of definition that Valerie and Ray have put out there about the defining characteristics of modern learners? Darryl, you're on mute.
Thank you. Once again, I want to echo my colleagues' gratitude to Trellis Strategies for having this conversation. I certainly appreciate it and recognize the importance of this conversation, because we need to understand who our students are. Working at UNCF, we definitely have a very broad spectrum of institutions. One of the things that I would say we are definitely looking at with this new modern students is understanding that it's no longer just the traditional students, right? I think I heard Valerie talk about this when I came back online. We have been very much dependent on traditional students for a long time, thinking that was the model. Well, as you know, that there's enrollment decline where the birth rate has slowed down. Our students or our potential students are questioning the validity of a 4-year college and thinking about what would be the best approach for success for them. We are also looking at the military, right? How do we embrace those individuals that went to the military after high school, but now looking to add to their knowledge, their skills and abilities? We're looking at students from the foster care system. When you think about foster care, that's been a very underrepresented population of students. Most foster care students or children or young adults are trying to think about what are the next steps for them. And they feel that once they are removed from the foster care system, that they're no longer a part of society and they're forgotten. We're also thinking about those that are serving time for certain things, I don't know the best way to put it, but those that are incarcerated, how do we serve them in the spaces that they're in so that once they are back into society, that they can be a part of the community and serve the society as they should have before they were incarcerated. So modern students nowadays look different than what we even anticipated when we think about inclusivity and being able to embrace all members of society. We have to also think of the international students. How are we? I know one of the things that our institutions is thinking about enrolling is these international students. Well, how do we serve them to make sure that they're successful if we are bringing them here in order to be a part of our community? So those are the only things that I would add. I do want to apologize. My internet went out. So if I double-clicked on whatever someone else said, my apologies.
No, you totally added additional characteristics. So thank you so much, Darryl. I think your point about those who are incarcerated or formerly incarcerated is a really important piece, as well as those in the foster care system. At Trellis Strategies, we've been doing some research around parents who are students and the difficulties that they face. And I also wanted to, and Ray might be able to comment on this as well. I was the commencement speaker at El Paso Community College in December, and I was blown away, Ray, by how many early college high school students were getting their associate's degrees at the age of 17, which is a different type of student, right? I know I don't think of them as traditional either, right, Ray?
Totally agree. No, I think that particularly in El Paso County, which is where, as we call it, EPCC, but El Paso Community College, one of our truly, all 50 of our community college districts are thriving, but EPCC, under the direction of Dr. William Serrata, their longtime president, do a tremendous job. They are one of the first early adopters of these P-TECH, what we call the P-TECH programs, which are early college high school students actually graduate from high school with an associate degree when they're enrolled in one of these P-TECH programs. And on top of that, Deborah, as you know, going back again to House Bill 8, one of the things that was truly, I think, remarkable about House Bill 8 was not just the change of the funding model, but the fact that the Texas legislature adopted a new financial aid program after looking at the situation over a year or two, seeing how there were financial challenges from some parts of the state where students, some of our smaller, medium-sized colleges would have to charge tuition and fees to be able to offer what we call in Texas dual credit, but what other states call dual enrollment, essentially high school students being able to enroll in college level courses in high school. There was a challenge. There was a financial barrier that existed, and to deal with that, embedded in House Bill 8 is a new financial aid program called the Financial Aid for Swift Transfer. We call it the FAST program, but it is a commitment by the Texas legislature to fund a financial aid program so that any student at any one of our public high schools in Texas that qualifies for free and reduced lunch under federal guidelines can enroll in dual credit programs for absolutely no cost whatsoever. And that includes the cost of instructional materials. So it's a real emphasis for us, dual credit instruction, dual credit learning. We require for a college to get funded under this model that a student complete 15 semester credit hours of dual credit before college can receive any funding under this transformative House bill. So so much has been done in this area, and I couldn't agree with you more. El Paso EPCC is not the only example, but certainly one of the true bright stars of making sure that high school students can graduate with an associate degree, which is so valuable.
And with that funding, that additional funding, it will only incent more and more community colleges to move into this space with our independent school districts. So, which is great. Thanks, Ray. I'm going to chat for just a little bit more about modern learners and in particular the challenges that they face before we move on to the transformation. I think many of you have hit on a lot of the challenges that today's modern learners are facing. And I think I'll go back to Valerie and your comments, Valerie, about thinking about how everything needs to change. And the pandemic started this about services that we provide and thinking about this student differently. And I think you referred to this, but I think today about today's modern learners as it not being a linear experience. In other words, they're not doing, whether it's 2 years or 4 years and getting out, that they may be moving in and out of the education system as it meets or fits their needs as they move forward. And so I'm going to go back to you, Valerie, in terms of thinking about, if you agree with my premise there, about how today's modern learners look at post-secondary ed. What are some of those challenges and that students are facing as they're trying to make, especially those that are workers first, are trying to make more of a traditional post-secondary education institution or system fit today their lifestyle, which is so different than that of a traditional student, which is what most campuses were built around?
Yes, I totally agree. The challenges, I think, have been there for a long time. I think that it is now, I think, higher education institutions are now more aware that we need to be part of the solution. Some of these challenges, especially as it relates to affordability, as it relates to accessibility, as it relates to understanding your options. I think that my fellow panelists identified quite a number of the other groups that we are also working with. Folks who are new to the United States, dreamers. We have incarcerated students as well. At SUNY, we actually have programs in over half of our state correctional institutions that are actually provided by our SUNY institutions. That would not be possible without the partnership with the state and with the Department of Corrections. And with the evolving landscape, with the understanding that educating populations actually lead to a more secure citizenry, is really part of, I think, the solution. We're coming, I think, away with an understanding of, as I mentioned earlier, the ideas of supporting students as it relates to mental health concerns. There's always been, I think, a population of students who might drop out or who might not necessarily feel a part of their community when they're in a college. It's incumbent upon the college, and I think this goes to our retention appreciation. It's not just about recruiting students and getting them admitted. It's about keeping them there and ensuring that they complete whatever degree that they are seeking out. So it's really, I think, the responsibility of the college to ensure that we have the kinds of supports in place. Many of you may be familiar with the remarkably successful ASAP and ACE programs that came out of the City University of New York a number of years ago. Well, I'm now working with one of the founders of that program, Donna Linderman, who was recruited to come to SUNY by Chancellor John King, who is an innovator in his own right, and identifying those kinds of successful programs. ASAP and ACE provide wraparound services to students to ensure that they complete not only on time, but also in some cases early. And we're talking about associate's degrees as well as baccalaureate degrees. So we have instituted ASAP and ACE now as part of the investment by the state legislature in 25 of our SUNY campuses, and we're already seeing tremendous results. The governor also this year in her executive budget proposal included an expansion of that support for next year. We're also in our legislative session, so nothing is final, but those proposals show the kind of commitment to long-term success that we want to see. And that also, sort of identifies sort of the needs of the students. It's not just about enrolling and going to class. It's about making sure that you have, bus fare to get to the campus, and make sure that you have, support for understanding what classes you need to enroll in, that you have access to the supplies that you need in order to complete those courses. So we're really significantly focused, I think, on providing those kinds of supports, not just through our ASAP and ACE programs, but through other avenues as well. And as part of also this executive budget, the governor has Governor Hochul has proposed free community college for adults ages 25 to 55. So that would be the first time we would see that in New York State, and that would be at a community college in high demand areas of the workforce. So we're busily planning for that. We're hoping and confident that the legislation will be adopted. We've seen both chambers actually support it in various ways, and so once we see the final results, we'll be able to put it into implementation. But that just goes to show you, and the reason I mention it is that it's not just free tuition, but it also provides support for fees, books, and supplies. So once again, we're talking about these additional supports that a student needs to be successful. And we really see that being a real responsibility.
Yeah, that's great. And that takes care of, I think, sort of the number one reason that students drop out is financial. The second is family or personal obligations. So that's another piece. So hearing you talk about more broadly wraparound services could be that bus fare to get to class, childcare, whatever that might be. Yeah. Okay. I'm going to bring in Darryl to see, from a broader lens, what challenges you're seeing or hearing about Darryl as well. I'm sure much of what Valerie spoke about is something that is seen across this country.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, definitely the number one challenge our students are facing is financial, right? They enter into higher education without first financial literacy. They don't understand what it takes to go to college, even when they fill out the FAFSA form. So they don't realize that the FAFSA may not cover everything at 100%. And then what happens there? There's balances. Sometimes our students, it's like a $200 balance that is preventing them from going from one semester to another semester, or even towards graduation? How can we support students in this area? I wanted to also mention academics. Our students are not ready for a college academic life, and sometimes, and it's not a blame game. It's an understanding that we are in a system, right? And so when they're in the K through 12 space, the system sets it up that if it's a standardized testing, they are going to school for those standardized testing, as opposed for educating them into the future. How do you use your critical thinking skills, your problem solving skills in order to get to the answer? Those things are not being prioritized, maybe is a better way to put it, right? The other thing I wanted to kind of pull out, and thank you, Valerie, because your commentary had me thinking about it, is what do we think about fluidity of education, right? And the reason I'm saying that, and you said it, Debra, when you talked about our students have family, they are working, they have other commitments, but yet we are talking about 15 to finish and getting them through college, right? But they have all of these things. So maybe in this modern society, we need to think about fluidity of education. How do we understand that there are ebbs and flows to a new modern scholar, and we build a system to that person, as opposed to trying to push them through something that might not fit any longer?
I love that idea, that last comment, Darryl, about being more student-centered as opposed to institution-centered, like what's easy for the institution as opposed to what's right for the student. And I also want to underscore your comment about academics. That's the third reason that I saw as to why people drop out. And sometimes they're not prepared, and sometimes it's just not a good fit, right? They, especially, right, Darryl, if they're first generation, there's nobody to advise them about where to go, how to go about all of that. So that creates incredible challenges for that population. And do they feel like they fit in once they get there? Yeah.
Debra, one
right.
quick comment, if I can just jump in here.
Yes.
This is such an important topic, and both Valerie and Darryl have really highlighted, I think, so many of the issues here. I mean, I'm a first generation college graduate myself. It's been 4 decades since I had my my post-secondary educational experience, but it's, the challenges that I faced are similar to challenges that first-gen students are facing today. And I think one of the important points here that I think both Darryl and Valerie touched upon is that from an institutional perspective, we don't need to go and overcomplicate this issue. I know that one of the privileges of my job is that I get to drive around to go visit each of our 50 community college districts in Texas. And a recent visit to North Central Texas College, where what they've done is just consolidate these services that we know students need. Career counseling, academic advising, financial aid, guidance, all of these things into a one-stop shop. And I know that that innovation is replicated across the country, but we need to make sure that institutions don't wait for that solution to come around because some grant needs to be acquired or some student success strategy has to be learned. Sometimes it is simple innovations that take the student perspective into account that make all the difference in the world. And this consolidation of these services at North Central Texas College and the focus on wraparound services, all of that is having such a tremendous impact upon not just retention, but completion for our students. A lot of important things happening. Yeah.
Yeah, Ray, thank you for bringing that up. And it's interesting because, we do the Student Financial Wellness Survey every year. And one of the responses, or the percentage that always blows me away, is when asked, does your institution have a food bank? How many people say no when there actually is a food bank? So it's thinking about, to your point, like, how do you make that front and center so that students are aware of it? And how do you remove any stigma associated with going into a food bank to get food? Those are, I think that goes back to this sort of student-centric thinking about the student and what makes it work best for them. And Ray, you've helped to transition us right into the next section here, which is, I really think, the meat of our conversation now that we've sort of laid the groundwork, which is thinking about transformation. And Ray, I'm going to start with you. The whole idea of transformation can be faced with resistance across higher education and within particular educational institutions. How have you seen institutions approaching the shift in the learners that they serve, and how are they overcoming potential resistance that they might be facing or seeing?
Yeah, well, I think, I've been around higher education in one capacity or another here in Texas for the last 20 years or so. And I know that, and in my position as CEO of TAC, of the Community College Association, for the last 2.5 years. But I do know that our community colleges have for many years really tried to respond to the transformations that have to occur to make sure that we keep up with the needs of the students that we are serving. So that's not necessarily unique to any piece of legislation. I know I talk a lot about House Bill 8 and the transformational impact. It is true, it has, and it is, changing a funding model really has caused our colleges across the state to update their business plans or their business models, to look at strategic plans or initiatives more closely. And all of that is happening. There's no question that House Bill 8 has spurred that kind of transformational impact. But I do think that our community colleges in particular, they are the front door to post-secondary education. I'll say that here in Texas, but I'll bet that's true across the country. We are the front door. And because of that, we are proudly open access institutions. We proudly take students as they come to us, and we build the wraparound and the support structure that is needed for those students. And I think that's been going on, really for decades at our public two-year colleges. Certainly here in Texas, that's been going on. But there's no question that over the past 4 or 5 years, maybe even more intensely over the past couple of years here in Texas, because of the change in our funding model, we are even more engaged in looking at that transformational approach. What do we need to do? Nothing is off the table. What do we need to do as an institution of higher learning to be able to support and build the scaffolding around students that they need to ensure that they are going to retain and complete that credential that they enrolled for? In Texas, as in other states, but in Texas, we were focused for a 15-year period, beginning in the year 2000 through 2015, in access to higher education. We realized the doors needed to be swung much more widely open in post-secondary here in Texas, and we focused on that for a 15-year period. In 2015, we transitioned from access, which still remains important, to retention. We wanted to do everything we could to build the student success strategies and that scaffolding that students need. And in 2020, we updated our current strategic plan here in Texas to what we call building a talent-strong Texas. And now the focus is not just access and retention, it is, where does that credential lead the student? Does it lead to true economic and social mobility? And we ought to be focused on those things. And the only way we can do that successfully is to take that student perspective, that student persona, and build around their needs. And I think there's no sector of higher ed better situated to do that than our community colleges. And I mean, I know I'm preaching to the choir in a sense, and of course I work for community colleges, but it is such a critical part of what we do. And I'll let Valerie and Darryl obviously jump in because they can talk about this much more eloquently than I can. But I'm excited for the momentum and the enthusiasm that we see coming from our public two-year institutions, both in Texas and across the country.
Yeah, and before we move on to, I'm going to go to Valerie next, Ray. I have to say, I was pretty intrigued by what's moving through the New York State legislature, this idea of free community college for those 25 to, I think it was 55. Is that anything that you see anywhere, Ray, on the horizon or anything? Or well, is that something you're going to wait and watch and see what happens? Or
Well, it's happening at institutions sort of on an institutional basis momentum, right? So we do have some community colleges who have their promise programs, and that seems to be a growing trend. Given everything that we've done with House Bill 8, I don't anticipate that we're going to see a statewide initiative, as Valerie has talked about in New York State. But certainly in Texas, there is momentum to the extent that a college district can do so to build out a promise program and do that in partnership with ISDs across the state. Yep.
yeah, but I'm talking more about the 26 to 55-year-olds, like that population, not necessarily. I know we have the promise programs and I know what Austin's doing,
Right.
but that older generation of how we get them, back in.
I have to say that is a very exciting prospect. I think Massachusetts might be doing something also in that particular population. It's something that we have an eye on. Again, because of the transformational change, I don't know that we can endure another truly significant transformation that quickly.
Yeah.
But we're going to watch what happens in New York and Massachusetts and see what we can learn.
Great. I was excited about, I also know after House Bill 8, they're probably like no more big spend there. So, but let me go to Valerie. And Valerie, if you want to talk really about in New York and specifically the types of trends, you've already talked about some of them that you're working on, but what resistance have you faced? And how do you see, are there ways to get around those or ways to have institutions really shift and think about their learners differently?
Absolutely. And I'll have to just say that from my position at the system office, and for those of you who don't know, the SUNY system includes 64 individual campuses within the system, all from doctoral institutions to our comprehensive four-year colleges to our 30 community colleges. So being the largest comprehensive system in the country, it gives us an opportunity to work with a variety of different mindsets as well as operational struggles. And, honestly, I think that it's about survival. It's about survival of these institutions more so than anything. You cannot just rest on your laurels and be complacent. The SUNY system, in fact, has lost 100,000 students over the last 10 years. And with the last 2 years, because of intentional planning and complete sort of investment in our enrollment strategies, we have seen an increase in enrollment across our system consecutively for the last 2 years. But that also takes state investment. We're a public university system. We rely upon our state to invest in those resources, along with obviously the tuition that comes from each of our students. But we have to maintain an affordable landscape for students to want to even take advantage of our offerings. So I feel that, in many of our cases, and 2 years ago, our state also invested $75 million in what they call the transformational initiatives. And that was specifically to talk or to invest in or allow campuses to invest in a variety of operational strategies that could lead to increase in enrollment, but also fiscal stability at their college. So that focused on the option to invest in the ASAP and ACE programs that I mentioned earlier. It also talked about expanding transfer pathways within something we haven't mentioned already, but one thing I was going to mention is the difficulty for students to transfer, especially from a 2-year to a 4-year college. We are really focused heavily on ensuring that those pathways are more clear. Many students come in the door, especially at a community college, articulating that they want to eventually transfer to a four-year college, but never really being able to take advantage of that. The statistics are very clear. So we want to flip the narrative on that and ensure that those expectations and those plans can be taken to fruition. So I believe that, the resistance that we are seeing is slowly eroding because people understand. We've had a number of situations of our colleges, a few of our colleges who have really been on the brink of fiscal instability, taking an intentional approach from the system office to ensuring that they are looking at things in a much more strategic way, planning out, not just assuming that the students are going to come just because you exist. You have to make sure that you have the operational mindset to ensure that your programs are in place. So we are really, I think, for the first time in a long time, and again, it's all due to Chancellor King's leadership. And I would also offer that leadership matters. And so his leadership, the leadership of each of our colleges, it really does rely upon that kind of strategic investment. And that's what we're doing at this point.
If I could, Valerie, I'm going off script. You talked about transferability between, 2-year to 4-year institutions, and you also talked about accessibility. One of the things that we see quite a bit, and I'm just curious if SUNY has tackled this, is especially for first gen, the enrollment pipeline, that the majority of people get lost before they even get to the process of applying, because again, it's a bit onerous for some folks that don't even understand or know how to get what's being asked for, which again, people opt out because they just go, it's too much, I'm out. Is that something SUNY has taken a look at or looked at simplifying?
Yes, absolutely. So we have actually a centralized application that is open to all students. Many students also apply to our colleges through the Common App. So we accept applications from both areas. To Ray's point about open access, our community colleges also have a very flexible model as it relates to applications. And we're being much more intentional with our community partners. Our school districts. Last year, for the first time, we also instituted automatic or direct admission for students who are graduating in the top 10% of their high school class in certain high-need school districts. And I know that Texas has a longstanding model of that. That's one of our examples that we wanted to build upon. And it was an investment. Unfortunately, it doesn't have financial awards related to it, but it's about sort of promoting that direct access, making it more simple for a student to access college without having to even submit an application. And that was one example. We're just collecting the data. This is the first year of its implementation, so we don't have the results yet, but we did have a lot of students take advantage of the opportunity. So we're always looking for ways to simplify that access. And then again, from the transfer perspective, looking at the communications that through advisement primarily that a student receives upon enrollment, getting to that student the day one. What are you looking for? What are your ultimate goals? What do you want to do? Do you want to end with a 2-year degree? Great. Do you want to continue with a 4-year degree? That's great too. Where would you want to go? So having that advisement up front and having that done on a regular, consistent basis is key to ensuring a student's success. So absolutely looking at all ways, all the time. It's a dynamic environment. It's not something that sort of ends on one program, but we continue to reevaluate and continue to look for new solutions.
I love the evaluation process. That's the best way to get at what's really not being solved through the current strategies. I want to bring Darryl in here. And Darryl, I'm going to ask you a broader question. And that is, as you know, we read in the headlines all the time, and there are polls showing that individuals are losing confidence in post-secondary education. So how can institutions leverage transformation efforts similar to what Valerie and Ray have talked about to gain support from key stakeholder groups, whether it's students, the public, the press, members of the legislature, etc.?
I think you saved this tough question for me. What is going on?
I did.
I love this question. I think it's all wrapped up, in the forward question about the lack of desire for transformation, and then how do we bring this about? I think it's very similar, right? And I'm titling this "The Power of the Co, Power of the Co," and I have three words that I am thinking about. The first one is co-define. And that power of the co, it means together, coming together, making decisions together, understanding what we're trying to do together. The problem I find is that no matter where you sit in the space and what type of stakeholder we are, we tend to do things in silos. We tend to do things in a vacuum instead of communicating with one another and understanding what role each stakeholder play in this particular space called transformation, and ensuring that we have a clear path towards change. Because, transformation, I think, also is beyond just change, but you have to change in order to transform, right? It's a key component of transformation. So first is co-defining transformation. What does it mean to you and what does it mean to me? Because it's two different things. One, we have two very different starting points. Two, and we are operating in two different perspectives, right? So we have to co-define transformation so that it makes sense in a very roundabout way. The second thing I would say is co-create. How do we come together? And yes, we've defined it, but now we have to create this strategy together that will move transformation, that will propel transformation across the board, because there are so many different moving pieces. You've talked about, we have federal guidelines, you have state guidelines. Some of us may have city guidelines. Then you have alumni, and we know it will not matter what anybody say. If alum does not or do not agree with us, then we have problems. So there are so many facets that we have to think about when it comes to transformation that we have to co-create together. And then the third thing, and I think it's all kind of tied in, is collaborate. I always say it like that, collaborate. We have to come together and think through these processes and work together as a team. Transformation will not happen if we do it in a silo. If we think that we can move forward because we have the idea, or we have the money, or we have the power, or we have the influence, all of that is great and it can move things, but the workers are the boots on the ground. They're the ones doing the work, implementing your ideas or what you're funding. And so I think that the power of the CO is where we need to situate ourselves.
I couldn't agree more, Darryl. And in fact, that first point you made, people fear change because it doesn't know how it impacts them. And so that's where the other co's come into play in terms of co-creating and collaborating. I love when you steal your co's. I'll give you credit for them, Darryl, I promise. I just realized we are at time almost, but I am going to ask you all one final question. And that is, as you look at, transformation and barriers that exist, if you had a magic wand and you could do one thing that right now you've got so many barriers, whether it's federal or state policy or institutional policy that's not allowing you to do it, or something else. If there's one thing, if you could make that happen to help modern learners really succeed in post-secondary ed, what would it be? And I'm going to start with Ray.
Of course, you start with the hard question with me. Darryl knocked that one out of the park, I have to say. That
She
was
did.
Oh,
so good, Darryl. Thank you for those insights. Okay, I think for me, just very quickly, more work-based learning opportunities, more internships, more apprenticeships. We do a smattering of that right now. And I know that this is particularly helpful to our more traditional age students. And we're talking about the modern learner, which I think includes obviously traditional age students as well. But I think we could be much better. Certainly in Texas, we're trying to be much better about providing for more work-based learning opportunities, because that to me is the most valuable aspect of the education that we offer at our public two-year colleges across the state. I'll stop with that.
No, Ray, I couldn't agree more. I will underscore, exclamation point, exclamation point. Couldn't agree more. All right. Ray set the bar high. Valerie?
Yes, he did. And I couldn't agree more. We currently have a aspirational goal to ensure that every student who graduates from SUNY has an internship under their belt by the time that they graduate. And we're working, towards that goal. So I couldn't agree more. I think that having more career focused education and having those experiential learning opportunities is just so critical at whatever age there are. And expanding apprenticeships, those are partnerships with direct employers. I think that that's something that we're really working on, especially with our State Department of Labor, but expanding that outwards to ensure that other folks have that. And just removing the barriers to application, just whatever that application process is. I think that we all sort of painfully experienced the simplified FAFSA in the last year and a half. But as the data is now showing, it does in fact look like it's working as hoped, in that there's a simplified process. So continuing to simplify those financial aid and application processes is what I would also suggest.
Right. You got two, but only because you added on to Ray. So I'll let you have it. The other thing I want to underscore about those work-based learning experiences is that they need to be paid,
Yes.
especially if you're talking about older or adult students. They need that. Otherwise, they can't do it. Yeah,
exactly.
All right, Darryl. You get the last word.
Well, okay, I will take it a little bit of a different direction because they covered workforce. Okay. I think I would wave my magic wand and give everyone empathy, that they will care for their students, that when our modern students come in, that it will not be a job, that it would be a ministry for them, that they want to serve these young adults or adults towards success.
And that aligns perfectly with your earlier comment about really building the experience around the individual student as opposed to the institution. So thank you all very much. This has been fabulous. Can you believe an hour has gone by? It just flew. It always does with these. Thank you. Your insights, your comments, your examples, so helpful to us. And I'm sure for the folks who participated in today's event. So again, thank you all so very much for being with us today. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.